call?
Yes, Mr.
I couldn't hear, actually. There was so much noise.
That's right, Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member Materia Ture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tēnā koe. The question is, and it's been said before, how low will John Key stoop to keep this little government cobbled together? Because that is what we're seeing happening with this scandal around Peter Dunne. John Key desperate to cling on to power and keeping people inside his tent despite the serious concerns about their integrity. And this certainly is not the first example of this. It was certainly the case in the past, previous national government, and it's certainly the case in this one that John Key will do anything to cling on to power, even if it puts the public at risk, and there are serious questions of integrity for his ministers. John Key needs Peter Dunne to keep supporting his unstable and his unethical government. He needs Peter Dunne for bills like the Sky City Convention Centre dirty deal. He needs Peter Dunne's vote to get that thing through, because he knows that it's unethical. He knows that the New Zealand public are opposed to it. He knows it will cause harm to hundreds of New Zealanders and to small businesses and community organisations. But he is desperate to keep this $400 million monument to John Key alive, and so he will do anything, including keeping Peter Dunne on side, in order to see that it proceeds. That is a Prime Minister who has no understanding of the effects of his actions on ordinary New Zealanders and their everyday lives. John Key has said that Mr Dunne was replaced on the Intelligence and Security Committee because he's no longer a minister. We would have seen that on television with John Key saying it didn't really have anything to do with the issue of trust, it's to do with the issue of no longer being a minister. That is just not the truth. That is just not the case. And in fact, membership on the Intelligence and Security Committee, it's required that every person who nominates someone for membership of this committee, this particular Intelligence and Security Committee, shall have regard to the requirements of security. Shall have regard to the requirements of security. Peter Dunne hasn't been tossed off this committee because he is no longer a minister. He's been thrown off this committee because he is not trusted by this Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's job is to nominate someone for this committee. He has removed that nomination because Peter Dunne cannot be trusted with the security that's required for this committee. Now, that is a clear implication from John Key, the Prime Minister. He does not trust Peter Dunne anymore. But despite that, and despite that clear statement, he will keep him on in some form in the agreement that that National has with United Future in order to be able to keep Peter Dunne's vote, despite the fact he no longer has any trust in Peter Dunne. The Prime Minister has to be upfront and honest with the New Zealand public. That is his job. He has primary responsibility to the well-being of the New Zealand public, not to another person in his cabinet, not to even his own party, but primarily to the people of New Zealand. And John Key is failing in that duty. It's interesting, actually, when you think about when did that rule change, because we have other members on that committee, the public might not know this, other members on that committee who are not members either. So, for example, Russell Norman and David Shearer, they're not members on that committee. They are trusted with the requirements of security, and they will continue to be members of that committee because they are trustworthy. Peter Dunne has been thrown off by the Prime Minister because the Prime Minister no longer trusts him. I want to just raise an issue that hasn't been discussed actually very widely at all in the debate around Peter Dunne and his actions and his reasons for resigning as a minister. Peter Dunne has been very clear that he can't explain himself his behaviour or why it is that he is still withholding information from the Henry inquiry. And as a result, there has been a lot of speculation about this being a salacious issue, about this being an infatuation that's been described. And the person who has no voice in this debate, the person who is subject to all of this rumour and innuendo, the journalist involved, has no voice in this debate. That journalist cannot talk about her sources. She is unable to defend herself against the accusations and innuendo that has been made against her. We have people like Michelle Bogue, a National Party toady, making defamatory statements about the journalist on television. Well, Winston Peters does have a voice in this debate, so he is not. I will not consider Winston Peters to be a victim of what's going on here, but the journalist, I think, is, because the journalist is a woman, because the journalist is young. That means that there has been a deliberate inference that somehow that journalist has behaved unethically in the relationships that that journalist has with members of this House. And that has not been, that accusation must be put down. It is not the case that that this innuendo is accurate. And this journalist has a real problem now because her reputation is at stake and she has very little opportunity to defend herself against it. I would implore the rest of the media who are dealing with this issue to bear in mind what is happening here with one of their own, and that this would not be acceptable to them if it was them or one of their own in their own media. Mr Brownlee talks about the Privileges Committee. The Privileges Committee is quite rightly investigating this issue. If there is an issue of a breach of standings orders, then absolutely the Privileges Committee should be investigating it. That does not give the journalist in this case a genuine voice to defend herself against the salacious and defamatory comments, particularly from the National side, about her behaviour. She does not have an option here. Mr Speaker, in essence, this is a very clear story. John Key is desperate to keep his government going because he has all sorts of legislation that he's desperate to get through on the basis of 2 votes from 2 MPs who have both had their integrity questioned, who both are teetering, as I have said earlier, on the edge of political oblivion. John Banks, as a result of allegations that he lied about his donations return, he's currently in court over that issue. And of course now Peter Dunne, who's resigned as a minister, but keeps the agreement, the policy agreement that he made in order for the government to continue, does continue. So he'll keep on supporting this government, even though John Key has effectively said that he no longer trusts Peter Dunne with any matters of security or consideration. This government is unstable, it's unethical, and it relies on the votes of disgraced men. And just like the last days of the Shipley government, for those who are here and will remember those times, just like the last days of the Shipley government, Mr Speaker, John Key is having to cobble together another National Party coalition of the disgraced. Thank you.
I call the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, there is a sword of Damocles